Hey, what's up, guys? I got a great one for you today. We're going to head to the Great Salt Lake area and share a bunch of photos from that. I'm hanging out here in Squamish, just north of Vancouver in beautiful British Columbia. It's like freaking stunning out. It's now, September 20th. And yeah, this is going to be a fun one. It was a period of 5 days. It was actually this past spring in April, I believe. It was a workshop that I ran there, and so I don't have a ton of photography because I was, making sure my clients got great shots. But I did have a day prior to do some scouting and shooting for myself, and of course, able to take some shots when everybody's getting some great images and things like that. So let's jump right into it. So here are some of my favorites from that particular trip. This is all just some of the photos that I picked out and edited and hopefully look their best. But I got a lot more to show from this trip. One of the things I concentrate on the most when I go to an area like this, and it's really any area, but it's more exaggerated when I'm in a place like this that has such beautiful, stunning scenery and space and color and light, is variety. That's what I'm really after. And so, if I were to look at just the metadata from this particular trip, let's see, we do everything here, pretty good number. I would say over half of the images are, 58 images out of 131 were from the 100 to 400. And then I also had a few from the 400 to 8. And then I actually did some with the 400 to 8 with an additional teleconverter added in there. So I guess actually if you add these two up, I shot more on the 400 to 8. But the images, let's see if we go this way here. I'm guessing we'll see more from, let's see how I can figure out how to do that here. We'll put file type over here, and then we'll put the lens over here so we can see as far as the images I shared. Yeah, it's still pretty evenly split there. I didn't even realize I shot some with the teleconverter, and that's because I was trying to do a lot of video on that as well. But in any case, let's jump into the images here. It started out during some scouting. Yeah, I just got to see my first coyote out there, which was really cool. Just quick grab shot. It was super, super early on that one. Yeah, 20th of a second, 6400 ISO. And then managed to see some of these goofy, interesting, beautiful chukar, which are really neat. So that was kind of fun to see. I've seen them in New Jersey where they stock them for hunting, which is super sad. But I'd never seen them in more of their natural habitat, although I don't know if they're completely native to this exact area or what the deal is with them. But in any case, look at the plumage on them. That's just like a stunning bird, isn't it? All right, meadowlarks, more chukar. They were challenging too. And then the thing I try to do is show off the habitat, right? Love doing that when it's really pretty. So here's a burrowing owl out in the rain, just kind of, again, showing off some space there. And that actually, it was really far away. 784 millimeter there. So still tiny in frame, even though he was, I had that much focal length in, So anyway, yeah, just trying to play around with some of that. I was doing, like I said, a ton of video on these days when I was shooting for myself. And that's what this was. This was all scouting. I was out there with Mary Anne Karren. If you're not familiar with her work, definitely check it out. Amazing, amazing photographer from the Great Salt Lake area. And my partner for this workshop as well. So anyway, some long-billed curlew, which were breeding and everything. And yeah, let me check again, just make sure my dates were right there. Let's see. Yeah, mid-April is when we're out there for that. So yeah, this was all just scouting day, seeing what we were going to find. Some rock wrens. I love working with them. Had some really cool clouds there. So played with that silhouette, tried to dial that in. And then for me, really loving to play with some motion blur stuff. It's something I've been working more and more to kind of add into a lot of my wildlife photography whenever the situation presents itself, or sometimes it's actually really good when the conditions aren't the best. Conditions might not be great for a really good portrait or static shot, and then you can get away with it. So super low light or just other conditions, like, it's all about reflections out here, for stuff like this. Well, if it's windy, the reflections on the water look like crap, but if you're doing motion blur and panning and stuff like that, it can work really well. So I did really like this image of these gulls kind of coming through with this flock. And then these beautiful colors, like the colors out there are insane. It's a lot of work though. That's the one thing the Great Salt Lake is, it can be intimidating, is it's so much work. So this was one of our first, I think this was I'm pretty sure it was a morning because I'm thinking about where sunrise is there. So this was one of the first mornings. The sky was unbelievably dramatic. And for me, always glad to have the 100 to 400 there. Imagine, so this was at 400 millimeter, so you can still show some space, but imagine if those birds came much closer to me. I'd be kind of stuck just shooting portraits, you know what I mean? The other thing I want to point out here is what I do when I shoot this kind of stuff. So you can see here, 200 ISO, definitely trying to keep my ISO low because what I need is the dynamic range on this. And you'll see why in a second. This photo, while it's slightly grainy here, looks pretty decent. You know, even if I zoom in here, you can see like there's some grain in there, but the quality on the bird is fine. And like, I'm just tolerant of the noise. I'm sure some people would try to remove it, but it doesn't bother me. But what do I have here is I have an incredibly bright spot of sun filtering through the clouds there with a good exposure and detail in it. And I can still see my bird and some of the surrounding habitat because that's how I shot it. If I had shot it any lighter, you can already see in the original exposures, this is straight out of camera, right here is starting to get right on the verge of blowing out. If I blew out any of those areas, they weren't going to recover. If I shot it with no detail there, it wasn't going to come back. And that's what I would have had to do in order to actually see and get some exposure on the bird. But that is not what I wanted. I wanted an exposure that just got the detail here with a low enough ISO that I knew in post I could bring the image up to that and make it what I want it to be. So you'll see a couple other images I'm going to show throughout this presentation that kind of mimic that behavior or that way of shooting. And yeah, it's an interesting way to shoot. Back again to playing with some slow shutter speed stuff, just trying to get some ghosty images there, playing around. The group and I were all talking about different ways to get creative. So we were talking about maybe slight overexposures when the graphical nature of the bird can work out. So that was an attempt there. Not really exactly an award-winning image, but something different. Then we did some walking around after that morning shoot. After the light kind of flattened out, the birds moved away. We just did some walking around Antelope Island, Loggerhead Shrike, Horned Lark was the best. So good. I closed down the aperture on this one just so I could get more detail in the mountains in the background. In hindsight, I probably should have done more, actually, in looking at that because the mountains are still kind of blurry back there. The other thing I could have done is zoomed out a little bit, but the thing you have to remember when shooting stuff like this is it's not just the focal length that you want to think about. You know, for me, it's the focal length and the size representation of the bird compared to the stuff in the background and things like that. I would have had to have gotten a lot closer if I wanted the bird the same size in the frame and I wanted to zoom out, right? I could zoom out here, show more, easy, but if I really wanted to make sure that I was going to keep that bird roughly the same size in the frame, which I wouldn't want him to get too much smaller, then I'd have to physically move in a lot more, you know, and that can be challenging. So the other option is to give it some space like this, close down your aperture even when you're shooting a telephoto lens and give yourself a little bit more detail in that background stuff. Tried to incorporate the flowers there, playing with some compositions. I mean, that's what we have in the background to play with, you know. So here's the evening shoot. I'll go through these kind of quick, but you know, I really started concentrating on shooting once the urban lights started showing up. We're playing around with bokeh, slower shutter speeds, higher ISOs. And listen, I have a very fast lens. I have a 2.8, 400 2.8 lens that would be most ideal to shoot something like this, but I was out there working, so I tend to not use that big lens then. And I still wanted to have that zoom flexibility of the zoom lens, of that 100 to 400. And you can see, look, even at a 5.6 lens, I'm still getting away with it, just shooting slow shutter speeds here, and the shutter speeds are probably going to keep getting slower. There we go, down to a 40th of a second, but you can make it work. All right, next morning, we're back at it again. We had another very, very dramatic sunrise here. Just some really cool, I mean, look at that. Isn't that crazy? You know? So here's where the zoom comes in, right? Wouldn't you love to show this off with a bird in it? Well, here we go, right? Here come the birds, starting to zoom out, getting in 240 millimeter range, 230. Let's get even wider here, right? Really showing off this habitat, okay? Just playing around with the drama there. Again, keeping my ISO really low. Look at the ISO there, you know, around 100-ish or 64, like the base ISO all along for all of these. So always playing with composition. I was trying to make sure I kept these birds in and around the light so that they would sort of show up. But again, let's go to some forward ones here. All right, here's one of my favorites here, just dramatic light coming out of the sky. He's placed right in this nice area of somewhat lighter water reflection, kind of in the V of the mountains there, but, you know, kind of blew out that, you know what I mean? So here's another favorite one, a little bit of a spotlight coming down right onto the bird there, highlighting it. They're straight out of camera. All right. Again, it seems extreme. I know it seems unbelievably extreme to most people, but look at this right here, much lighter, and that's going to overexpose. Now I could go maybe a third, 2/3 stops lighter and then recover that, but not much more. If I shot this probably a full stop lighter, there's a really good chance these super bright areas are going to overexpose. And again, I know I can do this in post and it looks fine. I shot it at base ISO. Like if I zoom in here, you know, I know you guys are seeing a screen recording, but I'm telling you, the quality of this is fine. Little bit of fine noise right here. This thing would print beautifully, and it was shot there. So a lot of people see these when I share them, and they probably think, and some people even comment, they're like, wow, you really underexposed that image. And in a way, yes, but to me, this is the proper exposure. This is the exposure required to get the effect I want, which is detail in these highlights, you know? So I don't see it fully as an underexposure. Another thing I started playing around with is the horizon line in a lot of these photos or the shoreline, I should say, wasn't that pretty. And so I started playing around with trying to crop that out. And so I played with just the reflection of the mountains and the birds walking through it like that. And then for one like this, I actually flipped it vertically. So here was straight out of camera. You can see that's the ugly shoreline I'm talking about. Not real pretty to add into the photo. This was how it was originally shot, and that's, you know, it's just a reflection. But I had fun with it and just flipped it in post. Gorgeous clouds that day, beautiful scenery, and again, having that 100 to 400 really helped off. Later, I think that same evening, this was like mid-workshop, we went to, I think it's called Bear River Migratory Refuge or something like that, just outside of Salt Lake, and had a great time there with our clients. I got to see again more long-billed curlew, and then to this particular location was almost all about birds in flight, but also just the scenery, the huge snow-capped mountains in the background, just trying to get as many birds as I can, just like this black-crowned night heron, super rare for me to see in a habitat like that. Snowy egret in front of snowy mountains, like I've never in my life seen that. I've photographed snowy egrets and night herons countless times in New Jersey and Florida and South Carolina and all up and down the East Coast, and obviously never seeing them with snowy mountains in the background. So a unique thing to me, and so therefore I wanted to really kind of show that off and incorporate it. Here we go, white pelicans flying in front of the mountains. This is an example of when they get a little closer. I should have closed down, but the blur I think works. Stunning image, right? Guys, even to this day, I still do this myself. It's the first time I ever saw a cinnamon teal, so just grabbed a documentary shot just to kind of have it in the catalog and kind of check it off the list. Certainly not an image I'll ever share, except for now you're getting to see it. Yellow-headed blackbirds, high on my list of birds to photograph. Definitely wanted to get our clients some of those, and Mary Anne found us this beautiful spot. The light was epic, as you'll see. It just started with these golden tones and these beautiful native grasses here in this case. But yeah, just a very charismatic, beautiful bird. Really had fun playing with the light, the space, and the textures of these grasses. And then when the sun actually started dipping down, it wasn't directly on them, still some beautiful open shade, mountains getting blue in the background, just beautiful colors and tones. You can see right there, the sun dipped behind the mountains. And so while I don't have direct light on these birds, the colors and layers and everything in the background, I absolutely love this kind of stuff, you know. Some white-faced ibis, another bird I haven't photographed much, and then back to these yellow-headed blackbirds. The alpenglow in the mountain in the background, like as soon as this happened, I was losing my mind. Just absolutely going crazy. Like I can't look at the color back here. On the 2.8 lens here, still closing down to 5.6 just to try and get something out of it. A bit higher shutter speed than I would normally use, but these birds were blowing all over the place in the wind. It was really windy that evening, and so definitely needed some shutter speed to freeze them, or else if it was still, I would have gone with a much slower shutter speed to get that ISO down. But oh my goodness, the colors back there were outstanding. It was just like, I was so happy. Like here's a straight out of camera, and then there's an edit right there, you know? So pretty basic stuff. You didn't have to do much to get it to be in a great spot. Playing around with some vertical stuff to see the mountains back there as well. All right, back to, I think this is our last morning out, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, last morning out. I'll just run through these real quick. Had a really clear sunny morning, so we played a lot with backlight and rim light. Just trying to keep the exposure down. I want to expose for those glowing hot highlights around the bird. But yeah, just the long lens for this kind of stuff. And I remember why I chose it to go here. I had already shot some of the scenic stuff, and knowing the location that we were going to go to had a shoreline that was a little bit closer back there. And I knew the 100 to 400 just wouldn't give me that smooth, dreamy background in the same way. And so I decided on that last morning to actually take the 400 2.8 out with me, and sometimes like this, in this case, shoot it with an additional teleconverter in. And again, I wanted to play a little bit more with video and just kind of compressing everything. So you're going to see some 560 and I think it's 784. There we go, when we really zoom in there. But all about simplifying, just getting portraits. And listen, while I love the scenery there, sometimes a portrait's the way to go. So I have no problem kind of mixing up the variety there. There's the final image, straight out of camera, final edit right there. Couple more silhouettes and rim lights and backlights, playing with the bokeh, just waiting for them to go right in front of that sparkling sun. Settings are extreme at this point. Again, you know, if I don't expose dark enough, these highlights, the direct sun on the water is just going to overexpose, and it's not going to be what I want. So base ISO of 64, and I'm still at 32,000th of a second at f4, right? So max shutter speed on that camera. Not 3200, 32,000th of a second. Using aperture priority and auto ISO, because, watch this. This is like the same bird walking through right before 10,000th of a second, which is still insanely high, right? But as soon as it gets in the sun, I need it even darker. So aperture priority with some negative exposure compensation lets it just dial right in. Then watch this. He moves outside of that exact sun reflection. And then just like that, all I have to do is just change this a little bit. I'm down to 1,000th of a second. And then the camera actually starts bumping the ISO up a little bit for me to keep that 1,000th of a second, because that's where I wanted to be set at. And so now I can just get an exposure there. So imagine manually trying to change your ISO and shutter speed from 32,000th of a second at 64 ISO all the way down to 1,000th of a second. Like, you're talking a bunch of spins on the wheel. It's a lot of settings to change very quickly as the bird kind of just walks through. And so for me, aperture priority auto ISO is the absolute way to go there. And then here we go again, right? Just back right up to 26,000th of a second. Let's see, I think I had one, I thought I had set aside one that I'd shot really dark, but maybe not. Maybe it's later on in the series here. But in any case, starting these exposures pretty dark, just making it all about the rim light like that. And then other times making it about the bird. Savannah sparrow on the way out. Some more gulls in flight were really cool. And then this is the last evening out. So yeah, really cool stuff. We went out, had another beautiful clear day, lots of silhouettes, just playing with tons of variety, trying to isolate individuals, lots of zoom again. We went to a place where I knew we'd have a ton of space. This is what I was after. I really wanted to get my clients this horizonless thing where the lake just sort of, the water blends right into the sky seamlessly, because the lake goes on forever in your view, and you can't even see a horizon anymore. It basically just like melts away. It's an incredible looking thing. There you can see it there. It's just like birds, and then where's the water and sky separate? it's almost impossible to tell, right? So just incredible, incredible rich colors. So we shot the hell out of these silhouettes when they went off to the side, getting some mountains in there. Then it dimmed down off to the sides again, pastel tones, some beautiful colors getting lit up, just trying some different stuff there. I think phalarope flying through, if I'm not mistaken, but mostly avocets this particular time of year we were playing with. Just playing with the compositions, the colors, the light, you know, trying to show off how crazy, how many birds are there when you actually like lift up your perspective instead of being down water level. You know, even things like this, guys, for me, waiting for that bird to walk into this notch right there. I remember doing that, you know, it's like using the scenery and the habitat to kind of frame your subject in a way is really important. Got to see a jackrabbit, I think that's what they are, jackrabbits out there. So that was cool. I'd never seen one. Rock wrens with some pastel colors. This is the last morning of the workshop. We all didn't want to get messy. It's such a process to clean up. So we actually just stayed up on the island and played around with all the different wildlife there. Some beautiful backlit bison that morning, which was really, really cool. Then played with the horned larks again, just trying to have fun with this rock and the habitat and the compositions, some layering and depth in the mountains there, finding some mountains in the background with this western meadowlark and loggerhead shrike again. And then we did find some pronghorn, which were cool, and then wrapped everything up with a willet right at the end. So I'm going to show you just a few more photos here real quick. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. Here's some of our guests out there shooting and enjoying the Great Salt Lake. It's an absolute blast. Everybody gets an absolute mess. You can really see here just how many birds can be out there, and they're pretty tolerant even when you get some people up like that, you know. But yeah, look at this, just birds as far as you can see. That's what it looks like. We take everybody right out into the middle of everything. One hell of an experience. So there you go, guys. That's my Great Salt Lake experience from this recent time. Maybe I'll do one of the other visits in the near future. But thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, just like before, I hope you get inspired by some of this imagery. And I try my best to talk about some of my techniques and approaches and my ways of thinking in these videos, so you can hopefully pick up something that's helpful along the way to help you do your photography and get a little bit more creative.